Before we begin, please be advised that this show may contain some adult themes that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Use your discretion. Now, on to our show. Welcome to the Sip and Saga Society, where we cover histories, mysteries, and just any story worth telling. My name is Karina, and I am your host. And today we have Randy and Greg. Yay!
Hey.
Hey,
Today we're changing it up. Today Greg is gonna go first. I like wild. And then I will tell us our bigger story, and Randy's just gonna hang out and give us more
Okay.
commentary. I love Randy's
I
commentary.
appreciate it.
Which also, yes, thank you so much, Randy. I know you were not feeling well, so this is perfect.
You know what? It's not hard when all you're asking is of me to talk when I find something interesting. I can do that.
I think this is going to be a really interesting episode. This is, I feel like, the lead up to what we've been talking about, honestly. Like, this is like one of the biggest events,
I
in my
will need to
opinion.
find a way to talk about what I wanted to do tonight, though, because I really need you guys to understand the amount of elephants and jewels that were taken out of Delhi. It's just astounding, okay? It blew my mind.
Well, we can talk about it, Randy, because this this episode we're going to cover the year 1739. I will be covering the Stono Rebellion, but in order to kind of lead up to what I am talking about, Greg will have to give us a little bit of prehistory to the history. Randy and I always talk about how nothing happens in a vacuum, so you have to do like extra research. I mean, I guess Greg understands this too, being a professional historian. You need more information before you get the information that you were looking
yeah,
for.
you always have to back up a little bit and
Mhm. Understand what was going on. So,
hmm
in every episode, we cover just one year, and Randy had a little bit of something that happened in 1739, and now I need to know about it because elephants were involved, apparently. Mm. Oh yeah, I forgot we're drinking. My bad. What are we drinking, guys?
As I said, I am not well this week. Um, that's why I was very grateful that Greg is going to be stepping in to help Karina on this episode with world context. But for my drinks, I have my standard ice cold Brita water. I have a little can of Sprite that one of my friends gave me because I am unwell. And I just made um, a cup of cinnamon tea with a little bit of honey.
I love cinnamon tea. That is one of my
It
favorites.
is my favorite. It's my
Mm.
absolute favorite.
I grew up
Nothing,
drinking a lot of it. Yeah.
nothing for the a sore throat like hot tea, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Greg. Do you have a wild can?
not anything super wild. It's just the Voodoo Ranger Juice Force IPA. So it is just a really strong beer.
These
It's
are
like
just
10% per can. So
mm. I saw you
that's it.
drinking those. I was like, what is going on with that? You're like, I just bought a lot of them.
I did, yeah.
I went with a Carolina Bulldog because it felt Southern. It felt
Mhm.
right for the topic. I don't know. I had the White Russians in the house already because I still haven't finished that pack from 40 years ago.
I'm glad that you're enjoying the Carolina Bulldog.
I have really liked it.
You
And then
know,
with
I've seen a bulldog drunk on a Carolina Bulldog.
no,
That
Randy.
happened at a pig roast. If you want to get real southern, it was a pig in the ground, as a matter
Oh
of fact.
wow.
I'm getting wild. Did they hunt the pig that weekend? Because that would be the ultimate event.
Like they
No, I
killed the
don't
pig and then
think
put it in the
so.
ground?
I don't
Yes.
think so. But I also got drunk that time, and it was a fun time. It was a fun time.
I'm sure the dog also had a good time. I don't know.
Karina, this dog was so drunk it couldn't sit in people's laps. It would just slide down their
It's
legs.
like falling over.
Okay, Randy,
I felt so
how did
bad.
this dog get?
He
Who gave it to
he
him?
got under my grandpa John's chair and drank his Carolina Bulldog. He drank my grandpa's drink. And then we were all like, "Oh my God." And he had a wild night.
Poor buddy.
It
It's
Hmm.
was
crazy.
it was really entertaining actually.
Randy. Controversial, but you know.
I don't believe in getting the animals that way. But if they get that way themselves, you know,
I mean, yeah,
nothing
who are
can be
you to
done.
who told you to go drink?
Right?
You're a
Who
child.
told you that that was okay?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about being that dog and being drunk and being that short and low to the ground. Anyway, okay. Randy, tell us about the elephants, please.
Okay, the fun fact. Nadir Shah, who is the person I'm talking about, was actually one of the people who inspired Napoleon. People call him uh the Napoleon of Persia, but he was before Napoleon and inspired Napoleon. He had an absolutely insane reign in terms of like pushing people around. He like bullied the Ottoman Empire, he bullied Peter the Great. He was like all over beating the Afghans, like doing all of this in Persia, and ended up in 1739, which is the year that we're talking about. He ended up sacking New Delhi, which was the capital of the Mughal Empire, and he rode in there with elephants leading the way. Men with cannons strapped to the elephants were were charging into New Delhi. I mean, it doesn't sound like it was much of a battle, if any at all. It really doesn't sound like they fought him that much at this point because he was so intense about his warfare. But he didn't want to conquer New Delhi. He didn't want to annex the lands. He just wanted to loot and pillage, basically. And when he left, he had 80,000, no, 80,000 carts of goods that he had looted from Delhi. And we're talking money, fine silks, jewels, uncut gems. They say that the worth, now it's hard to estimate because they didn't take really good inventory of it. They don't have the records of that. But they say that the amount that he took was somewhere around 97 billion out of New Delhi and took it into now modern day Iran. So it's a really intense story, and it's kind of hard for me to comprehend that it was happening like right alongside what you're going to be talking about tonight because it just seems like two completely different ball games, kind of, you know what I'm saying? Um, but I just thought 1739 in general was a really interesting year. It reminded me a lot of what's kind of what we're dealing with today with just a lot of geopolitical things happening around the globe and how you can have Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Gaza and then us in Venezuela all happening at the same time. That's kind of how 1739 sounded uh, for the timeline. Anyway, there's a little snippet of what I was going to talk about tonight.
Well, now I'm very curious about that future episode. Like, I need to know what
Yeah, I'm
happened.
excited because that's
We
an
will have
area that
to.
I don't study, so it's
Mhm.
stuff I don't know anything about.
We
That's
will have to
why
do
I
it.
don't want to say too much because the amount of context I have to give this story is back to what Karina was saying. There's a lot
Yeah,
of things
there's a
that
little bit of
I had
context
to
I was
learn.
thinking about. I have to give for Bacon's Rebellion too, like just a
Hmm.
little bit, but I'm gonna try to like keep it streamlined.
Oh,
Which
go
is
for it.
funny
I'm
because
ready. Go for it.
I needed Bacon's Rebellion to tell my story.
Okay, so if you need
We're just
Bacon's Rebellion,
nesting dolls of
yeah, no,
stories.
they literally are. It's almost like events in history influence later events, you know? It's crazy how that
Wild.
happened. So yeah, you asked me to talk about Bacon's Rebellion, and I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, well, there's a couple like pre-points that like have to be made about that too for some of it to make sense, right? So when you look at Virginia as a colony, I think one important point is that it's incredibly unequal, like in terms of the class hierarchy, right? Because one of the things, like once tobacco becomes a cash crop and people start really colonizing Virginia and settling, and getting into conflicts with Native Americans, they really try to encourage people to come over. And so you can, if you're semi-rich, or like let's say you're like the second or third son of a noble in England, and you're not gonna like inherit your father's lands, he could just like throw some money at you and set you up in Virginia. And so one of the ways to do that was to not just pay for your passage, but everyone else that you pay for, like if you have a wife or if you have kids or if you have servants, right? And that's the big thing. Anyone you pay for and like sponsor for their voyage, you get land. You get like 50 acres or something like that. So it's really easy, really quickly to, if you have a decent amount of money, buy like this huge property that you're going to grow tobacco on and become a rich planter, right? And so a lot of the people that come over can't afford that. And so they come over as indentured servants. So this is like a step above a slave where you can't afford to come over, but someone pays your contract and you agree to work for them for like 5 to 7 years. And then once your term is up, if you've survived, because that's also a challenge, you're supposed to get paid your freedom dues. And so you would get money or like clothes and tools. And it's to set you up as a freed man, like someone who doesn't owe anything to anyone else to become your own a planter and buy land and stuff like that. So, and they also, funny enough, pay women to come over. You can look up the tobacco brides. They would literally say like, if you could basically, they try to send these eligible young women to come over to be spouses for some of these men and like literally are like selling them basically. It's kind of like, oh, if you pay enough money, you can buy it. You have the chance to get a bride and you can get one of these women, I'm sure there's terms and conditions and stuff like that, but you
I'm
could,
dead,
right?
Greg, not the terms and conditions.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I know. So that's an area I don't know a ton about, but but that just shows you how much it is kind of focused around like if you have money, you can get land, you can get wealth and stuff like that. And so by the time you get into the 1670s, which is when Bacon's Rebellion starts, you have a lot of these men who came over as servants who survived, but then they either got stiffed on their dues because these masters were stingy, or they were like, we can't really afford to pay you because sometimes the tobacco prices will crash. It's like, any other like economic thing, it fluctuates. And so, for various reasons, you end up with a bunch of men who don't have land, who can't marry, they don't really have any prospects. And in fact, a lot of the colonial sources from the governors refer to these men as wild bachelors because they're these like unmarried men who are living kind of on the margins. They don't own land, they're squatting, they're getting into conflicts with Native Americans, which is another big part of it because there's been multiple, I think three Anglo-Powhatan wars at this point in the colony, like two or three, I can't remember the exact dates for those. And so by the time like 1676, by the time we get to that year, there's lots of men who are like getting into conflicts with Native Americans. They don't have any opportunities. And the governor does something that is really unpopular with these people where he essentially tries to be like take a more peaceful tact with indigenous tribes, right? He's kind of like wanting to try to negotiate peace with these people rather than like absolutely drive them out. And so that's where Nathaniel Bacon comes in because he kind of takes this position as someone who represents he's a demagogue. He kind of like takes the grievances of these men and sort of channels it into being like their spokesperson because he's a little bit higher up the social ladder. And he's like, we need to exterminate Native Americans, basically. Like, there's some records where he is basically calling for, like, he says that we should, like, extirpate them from the earth. Like, we should need to completely like it's pretty harsh.
Also,
And
they're in their house.
yeah,
Imagine
oh, I know. But he's like
there's like
that's
six of
not hard
you.
enough. we need to drive them out of here and give these people land, right? They need to have land and opportunity. And the governor is favoring native people. He's not taking care of his own English, fellow Englishmen. And so there there's a militia that's raised to try to like go out and deal with some of these native groups and push back. And for various reasons, Nathaniel Bacon turns that on the governor, and they decide to march on Jamestown uh, instead, right? And so now it's like it's an open rebellion against the planter elite and the governor, right? So you've got a coalition of disgruntled European men who've come over here. You also have some enslaved people as well. So there are enslaved people here. The numbers are lower than they will be in later times, but it's this coalition of like various people who rise up, and it's definitely like a class kind of thing, right? Like the grievances transcend a little bit of like race, so there's black men who are involved in this uprising and in this militia too. And obviously this terrifies everybody. They raid Jamestown and the governor flees, and they actually burn much of Jamestown to the ground. And so you have essentially open civil war in the colony, right? You have people fighting on both sides. And it kind of peters out a bit when Nathaniel Bacon dies of dysentery. So, like it's one of those like weird things happen in history. Like had he stayed alive, this may have gone on longer because he's kind of the figurehead, but he does die, and then other people are prosecuted and, punished for this uprising. And it's funny because like older historians used to, and even people like Thomas Jefferson would look at this and say, this is a sign of like the coming of American independence. Like people who lived here couldn't like, they couldn't be told what to do. And like most historians nowadays think that that's way kind of overblown, you know? That's a little too like everything has to be about the United States. Um, and so the way most historians, I would say, frame this now is that this starts Virginia down a path where um, chattel slavery is going to be more like, having enslaved Africans is brought over, is going to start to replace indentured servants. Like it's not immediate. It's not like they're like, oh, this happened. There were a bunch of poor men and enslaved people who were fighting in it. Um, so let's just have slaves now. This happens over time, but it kind of starts to push Virginia on that, like as a colony, onto that path where like more and more people are like, we don't want to deal with these indentured servants. Well, I have to give someone their freedom when I can own someone forever. It's a one-time investment, and I always have them, right? And so over time, like that's after the 1670s is where you start to see the numbers climbing up in Virginia. And then that gets to the other thing I said I wanted to talk a little bit about, which is the 1705 Virginia Slave Code, because I think it's really interesting as someone who studies religion, because that's one of I show this to my students a lot, like chunks of it. It's a document where you start to see those color lines being drawn between like white, like you start to see even in these codes, and there's all sorts of rules about who can do what, and it refers to like freedmen and slaves, but it also kind of very clearly like white equals free and Christian, black equals enslaved and heathen, right? So, for instance, like that code closes a loophole that existed where if you were an enslaved person and you converted to Christianity and got baptized, you could be given your freedom because there's, the text in the New Testament, I can't remember which book, that says a Christian shouldn't own other Christians. And so some people had used this as a loophole to get their freedom. And this law closes that. It's like if your mother was basically, it starts the whole like if your mother was a slave, you should be a slave for life kind of thing. And so converting doesn't matter. Like it deliberately tries to cut off this avenue um, that people had. That really like especially after that point like solidifies Virginia as a slave society where more and more like the labor force is enslaved people. And so that I think kind of sets up what you want to talk about. But I don't know if y'all have questions or if there's any comments y'all want to make about that. It's kind of like a summary.
Yeah, I just find it so disturbing, honestly. That I think that's my biggest takeaway is depression. Greg, thanks. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't love that so many of our stories talk about how to make somebody else subhuman. You know what I mean? It's that's what this is. This is the conversation of why this is systemic, right?
Yep. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, pretty much.
Yeah, I could like go out of my way to find like uplifting stories, but a lot of them really really
You really
aren't,
have to go out of your way.
unfortunately. Well, or I mean it's
That's
complicated, right? I mean they're
Mhm.
messy stories.
Yes, and they just keep getting messier.
Hmm.
But yeah, yeah, I do feel like you really set up what I'm gonna talk about really well. And then I will bring up Bacon's Rebellion again later, but
That was kind of the goal.
oh God. Hey, Greg, I knew where you were going.
I
Anyway.
set it up well for you though.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
I like it. Um, well, the year is 1739, but we needed the prehistory, and now the other big event that happened in that year, the Stono Rebellion. So today we're gonna talk about a guy named Jemmy, an enslaved person living in South Carolina. He was from the West African region, which had a similar climate to that of South Carolina, so it was like great. He knew how the plants worked. At this point, only about 15,000 out of the 45,000 that were living in South Carolina were white people. So it's like they're really outnumbered. But Jemmy was not just a farmer, he was also a warrior. And he knew that they would have to fight their way out of this place. Like it was easy to see that anyone that's like kidnapping you and taking you across an ocean to come and work because they don't want to work isn't gonna let you go anytime soon. He knew he had to do what he could to save himself. And he was also able to speak English and Portuguese, as well as his native language, which is believed to be Congo or Angolan. He was also trained in combat. So he, like, if you're going to get taken, this is the guy, he has all the resources and the knowledge. Recently, in South Carolina, malaria had reduced the Charleston population. They had also learned from the Spanish agents that snuck through the plantations throughout the colonies to Florida owned Spanish that they could be free if they could make it down there. So they had a place to go, knowledge that this was really their only option for freedom, and circumstances that were in their favor. On this Sunday, September 9th in 1739, Jemmy gathered with 19 enslaved people along the Stono River about 20 miles from Charleston. They gathered before the sun rose and had decided to meet on Sunday because most people would be in church, so there'd be like the less possibility that you're going to meet somebody. South Carolina had also just passed a law that every free white man must carry a firearm. But that law hadn't gone into effect for a few weeks, so it was like, this is the time. They're not armed, there's less of them. They're all in church right now. They met before the sun rose at the Stono Bridge, then broke into a hardware store that sold guns and ammunition. They killed the shopkeepers, took the weapons, and kept going. They arrived at Wallace's tavern, but did not murder the innkeeper because he was a good man who treated his slaves well, and he would be the only white man spared during this rebellion. They traveled 3 miles down the road and had doubled in size, with reports ranging from 60 to 100 self emancipated Africans carrying banners, playing drums, chanting, and dancing. They were going for their freedom. And they made it 10 miles down the road and had killed every white man they had seen, except for a man on a horse who got away. But unfortunately, that man was William Bull, the lieutenant governor of South Carolina. It's just terrible luck. They should have killed him.
like also not to judge though. Why are they leaving like that? That seems that seems like a way to get caught. Am I wrong?
I think they were just trying to take all their free people that they could along the way and get rid of as many white people as they could.
Well, I think the drums, like, so on the history side too, like a lot of there's been historians who've looked at like drumming as like it's like a war practice too, and that's a way to like call soldiers and stuff. So a lot of them, like you said, he had this training, and a lot of other people did too. And so, this would be kind of like almost like a military camp. It's like you're kind of you're not fleeing, you're marching down and kind of taking out anyone in your way.
I mean, I'll give it to them. They had gumption.
Yeah, I know it's bold.
Hmm. I see the vision though. Like if that's a way to call other warriors, even
Hmm.
if I didn't join the meeting, I can understand this concept of, oh, we do that in my village or a variation. I know
Yeah.
that means come and we can go.
Hmm.
Well, and then at this point in South Carolina, people had a lot more freedom. So they knew each other. They could talk to each other. So even if they didn't know the exact day of the rebellion, they could have gotten the message that something was going on. So I could if and also they outnumbered all the white people in the area. So
I
if we
know.
all, I think that he was hoping that all the numbers could help him, would help them in survival. But no, William Bull summoned an impromptu white militia who found the group and immediately started fighting them. Approximately 25 whites were killed and 40 to 50 of the African militia died, while others were captured, imprisoned, interrogated, and some murdered. Those that were murdered were often beheaded and had their heads fixed to a post entering the city. This rebellion would end up changing the way slavery was approached not only in South Carolina, but all throughout the colonies and America eventually as a whole. For 10 years, the slave trade slowed down because it was believed that the violence of the Stono Rebellion, along with the smaller rebellions that were like constantly happening, was a direct result of their African origins. Instead, they encouraged reproduction among the slaves that they already had and would buy humans from an estate sale and auctions. Eventually, they would start kidnapping people again, but avoided the Congo Angola area because that's where Jemmy and his friends had come from, so that must be the cause of the issue, not the kidnapping people being shipped across the country or across the world and forced to work in bondage for the rest of your life. But before the Stono Rebellion, South Carolina had been under the 1696 slave codes, which meant that slaves were armed, allowed to travel between plantations, allowed to travel to Charleston, and all unsupervised. There were a lot more freedoms. I'm not saying that they were living their best life, but there were some rights to be had before the Stoner Rebellion. Children were to follow the condition of the mother, so if the mother was an enslaved person, it did not matter if the father was white. They would still stay in intergenerational enslavement. They were even allowed to sue for freedom, but not very likely to get it. They were allowed to grow their own food and sell their own goods. So they had, and they would like hang out and talk to each other and have their own church services. After the rebellion, those small, simple freedoms were quickly taken away. The new legislation for, uh, forbade enslaved people from growing food, earning their own money, learning to write, or gathering. They were not allowed to gather in groups of three or more, and black males were prohibited from traveling together in groups of seven or more without a white man present. The changes did not stop at what they couldn't do. It gave white owners new rights, including the right to kill rebellious property, I guess, and even regulating the color that they could wear. White people were the minority and they needed to establish population control from whatever cruelty they could keep to keep their fears from coming true that they would be overtaken by the people that they've been enslaving. Most states would adopt this new set of laws, ingraining it into the fabric of America. We've already discussed why Europeans had such a need for labor and any means necessary to get that labor, but that did not mean that those in bondage never fought against the system. Herbert Apotheker wrote in his book American Negro Slave Revolts that there were 250 written accounts of at least 10 enslaved people joining in a revolution. On occasion, white people would also help in the revolutionary efforts. In 1663, indentured white servants joined forces with enslaved black servants in Gloucester County, Virginia, and formed a plot for freedom. They were betrayed and ended up executed, but that doesn't make what they did any less heroic. And I think that really sealed the deal on the fear because this is showing that, oh, they can band together against us. That, along with Bacon's rebellion, was super terrifying. The only fear greater at this time, other than an enslaved person rebellion, was that the poor whites would join together with those in bondage and overthrow the upper class. In the early days, both white and black servants were treated terribly. So and they had a lot of reason to commiserate together.
It also sounds like another reason not to bring any more indentured servants over.
Oh, keep their
Yeah,
numbers down.
absolutely.
Edmund Morgan, author of the book American Slavery, American Freedom, describes it as two groups. Greg. Okay, fancy.
For
Describes
those
it.
who couldn't see, Greg gave two thumbs up to
I
the
Yeah.
was gonna
book.
mention it because it's the book on Bacon's Rebellion, but I was like, I always throw out books, so I was like, I'm not gonna do it this time.
We need all the books we can get. But it describes it as two groups sharing the same predicament. It was common for slaves and servants to run away together, steal hogs together, get drunk together, make love together. They were doing the same jobs. They were in the same vicinity. They were in the same class. They were treated the same way. But Virginia was not having it. So in 1705, they passed a law that required masters to provide white servants whose indenture time was up with 10 bushels of corn, 30 shillings, and a gun. Women were to receive 15 bushels of corn and 40 shillings, and newly freed servants also received 50 acres of land. This lessened the hardships on the white planter, and it allowed him to see, quote, his big neighbor as a powerful protector of their common interest. So, like, how could he be bad? He gave me a house. We're just going to ignore the whole he kept me in and has all of these other people in bondage thing. What they will do to your neighbor, they will do to you.
Willful ignorance is not something new this century.
Or, yeah, or this past 2 or 5 centuries either. It never ends. But I feel like that was not the end of this battle to create a separation between the people of color and the white people. Before the late 16th century, race was a way of describing a type of something. It just was like a thing, a type, a specific thing. Then Europeans needed people to work for them, so they had to find a way to separate people. In 1684, Francois Bernier came out with a comprehensive classification for humans. In a French article, Bernier described his theory in an article titled A New Division of Earth by the Different Species of Races Who Inhabited It. He created 5 divisions of humanity, with shockingly Caucasians at the top. This alone did not define whiteness, however. America or the United States, the colonies would continue to do that and then continue to create division and murder people willy-billy, however they felt like it. Anyway, what would help really draw this definition would be laws that kept the white man as superior, quote unquote. In 1705, Virginia would ban criminals or colored people, including Native individuals, from holding office. In 1790, the Naturalization Act solidified otherness by limiting American citizenship to, quote, any free white person of good character. This act was adopted throughout the states and would remain in place until the Civil War. The Naturalization Act of 1870 extended the naturalization rights to, quote, aliens of African nativity and to persons of African descent. The United States would continue to deny access to the non-white immigrant groups, to most of them, until the McCarran-Walter Act of 1952. This act would remove the last existing measures that continued to exclude Asian immigrants and allowed each Asian nation a minimum quota of 100 visas each year. In 1821, New York changed its laws to take away the right to vote from free black citizens. Samuel Young, not Samuel Lung, who cares? He's not a good person, would justify this by explaining, quote, the minds of the blacks are not competent to vote. The Supreme Court would go on to support this belief when, in the 1857 court case Dred Scott versus Sanford, The court ruled that black people, quote, are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens. They would go on to add that they were to be considered as subordinate and inferior class beings who had been subjugated by the dominant race, whether emancipated or not, had no rights or privileges. They had considered as beings unfit to associate with the white race in social or political relations and had no rights which a white man was bound to respect. I feel like you don't really have to say more than that. If you these are the laws that you're creating, your agenda is very clear. This statement was not just about slaves. It was about all black people because the sentiment was, well, they used to be enslaved, so even if they're free now, that doesn't mean that they're worth our respect. In 1924, the Racial Integrity Act of Virginia defined a white person as someone who has no trace whatsoever of blood other than Caucasian. Whiteness did come in stages, however. First, wait, the English are always white enough. First, the Irish weren't white enough, or the Jewish, or Italian. Now there are white Hispanics and black Hispanics. And even amongst the Hispanics, even amongst the minorities, there is that colorism that exists too.
I'm gonna need that as a sticker, Karina. The
Which
English
one?
are always wide enough.
Am I
Brilliant.
wrong?
No,
But what even is whiteness, Randy?
a
What
lack of
even is it?
melanin. It's
I
not
mean,
my fault you can't produce it anymore.
are you mad you can't go into the sun? But okay, yes, what even is it? According to W.E.B. Du Bois, I am given to understand that whiteness is the ownership of the earth forever and ever. But according to Michael Harriot, the author of Black AF History, whiteness is fear. And I personally cannot help but see it as such. That's it for today. Brandy and I have been wanting to be more intentional about bringing up how this is applicable today, but I feel like it feels very applicable today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, with these stories and the way that like people of various races and classes have been like kept pitted at each other versus like banding together against the people that are the real exploiters.
Yep. And it's
Well,
well, and it's oh, go ahead, Randy.
I was just gonna say it's so much division, right? Like that's it's they have to sow division. That's the only way that it works. And so buying into that division, now, I mean, obviously when they stopped allowing people to gather and things like that, that's physical division. Not a lot you can do about that, but the other parts of it, when you buy into that, that really is creating a the bigger problem.
As we both drink beverages at the same
Yeah.
time.
Not, yeah. We're just like, yes, it is.
Yes, exactly. But we're all on the same page here. This is the most echo chamber ever. No, this was like a really hard episode to like get through in the sense that you feel like you get a lot of hard information when you're looking up a lot of this stuff because
Mhm.
we have not changed much and it's really disheartening and disappointing to see that your own country has it against you.
Well, but this country is only for specific people,
Oh
right?
yeah, I forgot
Like
about that part. You're right, Randy.
like one of the, you know, things that I have heard that I really truly agree with is that feeling that you get that you don't belong, or sometimes called imposter syndrome, like that you're not measuring up to the things around you. That is that is manufactured. That is a situational thing. It is There are things in place that are specifically meant to make you feel like you don't belong. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
this country was only made for a very specific type of person to feel like this was their opportunity, that this was their home, this was their land, you know what I mean? And then everybody else is kind of like, where do I fit into this? What's my piece of this? How do I make this work for me? And you know what I mean? So when we think about this, I from a psychological perspective, you aren't supposed to feel like the country is for you because it's not for you. Like that's just what it is. It's not. Stop trying to be like, why doesn't this work? Why doesn't this feel like, what am I not getting? You're not getting exactly what you're not supposed to get.
It's not for you.
It's not for you.
That's wild. Well, and I feel like in light of recent events with some people saying if we hold people accountable, the system will fall. I'm glad it's not for me. I'm glad I'm not for this country. It's
That was rough.
concerning.
Did you
Uh,
watch it?
No, I just have watched the internet clips and it's
My mom
disheartening. It's
told me to
embarrassing.
watch
It was
that.
embarrassing for me to watch her go through that. Like, girl,
Yeah, it was
shut
hard.
up.
you realize what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, like you're so dumb. Ugh. She made me so angry.
There's nothing about what's happening today that doesn't make me angry.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's the pretty much the sentiment of the history of the whole thing, the whole episode today. All I could think about when Randy was talking about the 80,000 carts of stuff earlier, though, was that just built a whole industry. You have to get somebody to start manufacturing carts.
Karina, thank you so
Yeah.
much. That is actually one of the things that I did have time to write. It reminded me of that part in El Dorado.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking about? When they're like carving out the boats for them to take their riches on to the
Yeah.
other side. I was like, how must these people have felt that they had to build carts so that this invading army could haul away their stuff because they
Yeah.
certainly did not come with enough carts
That's
to
what I'm
take it
Like, we're
saying.
away.
gonna take
Like,
all your shit, but also you're gonna have to help us load it up and get it
Right,
out of here.
yes,
exactly.
you
And you're
have
gonna
to
have to
help.
build the things that we're gonna load.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad we all saw it the same way. I was like, we need some levity right now since we're
Yeah.
all angry.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually some really good things about that story. Like, if you want some levity, Nadir Shah was not about the raping and the pillaging by his soldiers.
Oh, I'm
He
surprised.
he put strict rules that if any of them were found beating up on the inhabitants of New Delhi or with the women, they would be cut, their noses would be cut off, their fingers would be gone. His soldiers were not going to do that without his express permission. So he was like for serious about it. And his rule is a little dicey, is a little dicey, but he really followed up with what he said. So if he threatened that, he was serious about it. And his soldiers knew that. The books, all of the books and articles and things that I've referenced so far say that his military forces were very, very well commanded. Like he would tell them to stop and they would stop. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I really liked hearing that about somebody. It was a really refreshing change of pace to be like this man was, but he grew up in a really like kind of poor, impoverished area. His rise was through the military, so his conquest was how he came to power. So he cared for his mother, and I think you see that in his story as it goes through.
Oh, I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah, I really will say I stand some of the things this man did. Now, not all of it because he killed 30,000 people like 3 weeks later, but and then he allowed the raping and the pillaging to happen. But then when he found out that it happened, he punished his soldiers. It was really interesting. It was really interesting. And then when they left New Delhi and like his men tried to take women with them, he sent them all back. He was like, if they're not here of their own free will, they're allowed to leave. And like they all left. And then when he would find some that they were like, yeah, had been coerced basically to say that they wanted, he sent them away too. So he would like go through and was like, nope, you're not here of your own free will. Adios. Go home. So,
I have conflicting emotions about him.
yeah. Yeah, you should because then later on he goes crazy and blinds his son.
Oh God,
Like,
Randy.
yeah, I'm not joking. It's a tragic story. Like I really like kind of all I think all stories like that, like conquerors and people of that time who like were doing that kind of thing, their stories are conflicting like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
The greats not meaning good, just meaning,
They took a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Anyway, so that there's your little lift up because I was really happy about reading about that.
Yes, I'm like, well, they can't all be losers.
No,
You have to be
somebody wants to protect people.
some
Somebody,
of them
yeah,
to an
somebody
extent.
cares.
Yeah. But speaking of people who care, we're going to talk about the people who have subscribed on our page. So thank you, Kirby and Daniel, for subscribing on our website at our tier that I don't remember. I think it's just the tipple tier. Yay! Thank you for subscribing and supporting our endeavors. And if you are someone who has wanted to support our endeavors, please visit our website, which Randy has been updating. Randy, what have you added to the website?
There is now a drink counter. There will be a meet the hosts section where you'll have little bios and photos that you guys can peruse. I know that people wonder what we look like when you're just listening to a voice if you haven't looked over at our video episodes. So there'll be a little meet and greet section, but there's also a drink counter there, so it'll tell you what we've been sipping on while we're recording the podcast. And then there's a little section for the book club so that everyone can see what the book club's reading. As you guys may or may not know, the Little Sips episodes tend to follow along with the book club reading. So that's always good and fun to know.
I love it. I'm very excited because I don't have to keep up with it. The website has been a struggle for me. I forget about it a lot, honestly. Anyway, blessed. But if you've enjoyed today's episode and, oh yes, I already said that, and would like to support our endeavors, please visit our website at sipandsaga.online, where we also have merch along with all the other fun stuff Randy has added. But thank you so much for listening today. We hope you're out there staying safe, keeping your mental health healthy, intact. Take some rest days. But for now, goodbye. Goodbye now.
That's
Steph, bye. Greg nodded.